So first of all, thank you all for coming here. Christian, I think, mentioned that he writes a book for Fortune 500 companies. So we are not a Fortune 500 company, obviously. We are the 10th largest YouTube channel of all time, however. When we celebrated our 10-year anniversary, I decided to write my third book, which is called The 10-Year Overnight Success, an Entrepreneur's Manifesto, How WatchMojo Built the Most Successful Brand on YouTube. Now, it's funny because when I decided to come down to Miami, I reached out to Venture Cafe and they said, do you want to come and talk about the obstacles and the journey? I said, sure. And on the flight here, though, I read the story of Lazare and Brothers, which is a originally French and New York-based investment bank. And this is like a company that has been around for almost 200 years now. And this is a story of a number of French Jewish brothers who literally at the end of the 19th century had to put up against a lot of prejudice, a lot of racism. They then endured the firm 5 times they were close to shutting down. And they endured 2 world wars, of which the second, they had to go through the Holocaust trying to leave Europe to come to North America. As I'm reading this on the plane, I'm like, the stuff we went through are hard, but pale by comparison. We all in this room have won the lottery. You know what I mean? I think we're all the fortunate ones. So when I talk about the journey and the challenge, I do want to kind of put a little bit of asterisk. That perspective is very important here, right? I mean, at the end of the day, my job is to rank top 10 lists. Is Batman better than Superman? What's the greatest skyscrapers? It's kind of just, it's important to have perspective. So I'm Canadian. If I don't reference hockey in this presentation at least once, I don't get to go back into the border. So the first tip I want to give on the journey to getting to 20 million subscribers or 10 billion views or bootstrapping and becoming profitable. The first thing is don't fight yesterday's war. There's a Wayne Gretzky. Who knows Wayne Gretzky? It's like the Michael Jordan of hockey. He has this phrase that everybody, like journalists, are like, guys in business, please stop using this. And I understand that. But it is a very true line, which is I skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been. So to be perfectly candid with you, in 2005, I had to kind of reinvent myself and start all over. From 2000, I graduated with a degree in finance from the John Molson School of Business in Montreal, Canada. Great school. Wanted to do mergers and acquisitions, spoke French, spoke English, and not compared to anybody in this room, but understood enough Spanish to think I could go down to Europe and do M&A, putting companies together. I ended up very much accidentally falling into the startup world, and I worked at one of the first search engines out there. And then from there, I realized I love the startup world, but I don't at all care to compete in tech because it's very zero-sum. The winner, whether it's Microsoft or Google or Facebook, gets all the spoils, or Apple, and everybody else is miserable trying to explain what went wrong. I realized I really liked the media side, and I ended up working at an online men's magazine called Ask Men, which was kind of like a Maxim, Men's Health, Esquire. From 2000 to 2005, I wrote a bunch of articles, over 1,000. I was a resident interviewer. I ran ad sales, had a good run, part of a great team. And then when in 2005, IGN bought Ask Men, and then News Corp bought IGN, I basically was out of a job. I had done such a great job that, without being part of a big company, there was nothing for me to do. So when I decided to start a business, I had just gotten married, I was 27, no kids, had a little bit of money saved. The mistake that a lot of people do is to say, oh my God, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to go out there and do the exact same thing, which would have been probably a fatal mistake because I was not going to go back and duplicate and replicate a winning formula and a leading company that was just producing articles. So I had never shot a single frame of video. I had never edited video. If you put a camera in front of me, I wouldn't even know. I couldn't turn on the oven yesterday morning in the house we were staying in. Like I would not. So I knew what my limitations were, but I knew that I developed a good skill at storytelling, at marketing, and at selling. So what I did is I said, where's the world going? And the world was going towards video. 2005, in May is when YouTube registered YouTube.com. In June, WatchMojo registered WatchMojo.com. 18 months later, they sold to Google for $1.65 billion. We were in the trenches trying to figure out. So the first thing that's key is you don't want to be ahead by like 5 or 6 or 7 steps because you'll be ahead of the market. And if you think of like the social networking space, you'll be Friendster. You might be MySpace. But you've got to be at most 1 or 2 steps ahead. And with video, we could see that that's where the world was going. WatchMojo is what I call in the third wave of video producers. The first wave of video producers were in the late 1990s. You had companies like Pop.com, companies like Pseudo.com, Mania.com. These guys were way ahead of the curve. They had to fight four fronts at once. They had to produce the content, they had to build up distribution, they had to build the tech infrastructure, and they had to go sell ads. Problem, in the late 1990s, you had dial-ups, so you couldn't really watch videos, and consumers weren't even accustomed to going to the internet to watch videos. So all those companies were dead on arrival. Then the second wave of video producers were in post-NASDAQ bubble bursting and post-NASDAQ. So yeah, NASDAQ and the .com bubble bursting. Those were companies like Heavy.com, Mania.com, all again pioneers, but slightly ahead of the market. So they raised you mentioned wanting to know more about venture capital, they raised $30, $40, $50 million, and they all burnt it because, again, they had to do everything themselves. When WatchMojo came around, we were in that third wave. Entrepreneurs always claim, like, I had the vision, I knew what was going to happen. There's a lot of stuff that you figure out by experimentation, trial and error. We initially were taking our videos and putting them on our website, which today seems very antiquated. It's all about where the audience is. So we decided to go where the clients and users are, fish where the fish are. So the first thing that we tried to do was launch WatchMojo.com, put content on there. Oh, by the way, if anybody has any questions, I don't mind if you stop. Yep.
So you mentioned 3 stages of video. What's the stage now? Is it
5. The fourth phase was companies like Awesomeness TV, who kind of got religion and were like, screw it, we don't even need a website. Make her. They were just like, our website is a corporate landing page. We're all about distributed audience. The fifth one is, I would say, and there's many ways you could slice this narrative. To me, the fifth one are the ones that are going mobile first, not even thinking internet, like desktop. That's like, we bet the farm on YouTube, not just because it's where the fish were, which that's where the users were, but because I said, I'm a mortal, I'm a human being. I can't turn a stove on in the morning. I don't want to figure out content and also figure out a mobile app, or if the app world doesn't succeed, if it's the mobile open web that succeeds, then I want to hedge my bets. And to me, it was clear that Google's engineering power and design team were going to figure that out. So we kind of made the right bet. But the reason why we made the right bet wasn't because of Google. So there's a saying that Warren Buffett has, the famous investor, and he goes, you only know who's swimming naked when the tide goes down, which is very true. And I'm sure in Miami you guys have, you apply that far more than we do in Montreal. So I apply that to my world by saying, if there's a real audience, the economics over time become legitimately good. But if there's no audience and you're faking the audience, then the economics will never catch up. So right now, you said you're on Facebook?
Yes.
So Facebook is getting a lot of bad press because economically it's not as viable of a marketplace as, say, YouTube. But what does Facebook have that is legitimate? Who here has a Facebook account? Who doesn't have a Facebook account? Let's try that. Okay, good for you. You probably are the only sane person. But the point is, if there's a real audience there, then over time the economics catch up. So if you are talking about, you start off saying the restaurants, and that's good. Don't build a website. You said the right words at the end. Instagram. Think of that, because that's where people are. They're taking pictures of their food. They're taking pictures of their drink. They're taking pictures of themselves eating a sundae. So if you're going to build something that's like a local mobile play that wants to transition to e-commerce, I was in China. I couldn't pay anything with my credit card. It was all Alipay. So in your case, the goal where the clients and users are, you want to build a business on the intersection of mobile payments, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. I would spend $4 on the website registering a URL. That's not going to get, it's like the world isn't going to spin the other way. Again, if you have any questions, now we're going back in time. Oh God. Okay. Guns N' Roses, patience. So I never raised a penny of venture capital, and as much as I'd love to stand here and be like, yo man, I never wanted to raise, that's a lie. I got turned down, I'd say roughly 100 times. Maybe it was 80 times, maybe it was 150, but it wasn't 5 times. And I used to say, nobody ever made me an offer, which is not true. It's like Tony Robbins says, you believe the stories you say. And for the longest time, I used to say, I never got a term sheet, no VC ever wanted to offer. And one of the VCs that definitely made an offer called me out and said, that's not freaking true. I offered you something. I go, yes, you did, and it was a crappy deal, and I'm glad I didn't take it. So technically, it's not that I never got any offers, but one of the reasons I never got an offer is because I never communicated a story that scaled dramatically quick. VCs want to hear that by year 5 you're going to generate $100 million. It's impossible. If you have a path to, maybe one fraction of a percent of those companies exist, but if you stand before a VC and say you're going to hit 100 million in year 5, and if the VC wants to give you money, like run for the hills because he's a sucker. Like that's not realistic. Explain how you don't need to put $1 of cost to generate a dollar of revenue. That's ultimately what they want. They want to just see that there are incremental economies of scale, that marginal revenue doesn't come at exponentially larger costs, even though companies like Uber are worth tens of billions of dollars and they do have a cost problem, which we're going to get to. But so, generally speaking, as an entrepreneur, what I learned very quickly was there was companies that I was seeing that were scaling so fast. And these were drinking buddies of mine. I'd go down to New York, I'd go to LA, San Fran, and we'd compare notes. And they were technically lapping us, and they were in very different businesses. Content doesn't scale quickly. Commerce scales very quickly, but the margins are poor. Jeff Bezos lost so much money for so long that today explains why they're so dominant. When people say, how come you're so big on YouTube? I go, if you're willing not to pay yourself for 6 years and become borderline insolvent and start picking out a refrigerator box in a back alley that you're going to soon move into, then eventually you become fairly dominant because you paid your dues. So, and then community. Community is fantastic, but there's no money in it because it's super hard to manage the quality of that page. But it's great because it's like it went viral, right? But virality comes with pros and cons, as I'm sure many of you have learned the painful way. Anyway, sorry, bad joke. The point is, things that grow very quickly overnight generally are not sustainable, right? So that's like something, it's a very personal question. If you have investors, as much as they talk a big game about sustainability and we're here long term, they probably are kind of lying. They want a quick payoff. They want something that grows really quickly so they could kind of brag to their venture friends saying, look, we grow a lot faster. So that's a trade-off. It took us 6 years to break even. It took us, on October 30th, 2013, remember the Boston Red Sox won the World Series that evening. An hour later, we hit 1 million subscribers. We launched in 2006. It took us 7 years to hit 1 million subscribers. But then a year later, we're at 5 million. A year later, we're at 10 million. The year later, we're at 15 million. And today, we're at 16 million on the core channel alone. But we only got in this position because we were willing not to come up with a get-rich-quick scheme and wanted to build a real production process to build content, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just the trade-off. And it's a very personal thing, right? So mentioned Warren Buffett. Another thing I like a lot about him is this concept of resisting the institutional imperative. Basically, don't be a sheep. Don't suffer from herd mentality. When we looked at YouTube in 2011 and 12, we were not programming for YouTube. This is actually a very fundamental question you all have to ask yourself in terms of the previous question of the return on your investment and the previous question of the fish and the previous question of going to where. So this is a fundamental question that if you want to actually strategize, I would say almost boils down to this, which is, right now, everybody is really negative and bearish on Facebook. Why? Because they changed the algorithm. They're not really showing a way for content companies to make money. Don't mean to be a contrarian crazy guy. Now is the best time to double down on Facebook. But it's hard, and you shouldn't do it using yesterday's tools, meaning don't put money to boost and don't put advertising dollars where you won't get any return and you'll up your burn rate. I'm going to touch about that soon. But if you can think of clever organic ways to build a real audience, a real community, a real interaction with your fans, your viewers, and clients, it will pay off, not tomorrow, not 6 months, not a year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 20 years. But Facebook isn't really going anywhere, especially since Facebook acquired WhatsApp and all these other things. Why? For the longest time, when everybody was throwing money at Facebook, that's what gave Mark Zuckerberg a big head, and that's what allowed Facebook to say, screw the people, we could do what we want. We, in 2011, saw a press release where YouTube said, they kind of said themselves, they said, we're going to spend $100 million on content with these channels. I was like, wow, Were we somehow included on this list? And I'm not aware. We obviously weren't. I went down, A through Z, went through W, no WatchMojo. I saw Vice. I saw all these other channels, Smosh, Crapster, all these things. I was like, how come did they not think of us? Most entrepreneurs, most human beings, you're like, man, it's so unfair. They probably, it's who you know, it's not what you know. But I said, look, if I was YouTube, I wouldn't take us seriously. We're not programming for YouTube. We're producing a boatload of videos. We're putting them everywhere, including YouTube. All these other channels have kind of started to make an investment on YouTube. But what happened? YouTube just threw money at these guys. These guys thought it was going to be easy money forever. And then they didn't really have a sincere commitment to nurture the audience. It was like, okay, we're the Wall Street Journal, we're Reuters, traditional media companies. YouTube wants us to be on their platform, so we're going to create this content. But it's kind of taking TV content and putting it on the internet, which does not work. So because it wasn't authentic, the audience on YouTube that could care less about traditional, they didn't connect with it. There was no audience, and then they all gave up and left. I, in 2012, came in, broke the hockey stick on the table. I said, we only have ourselves to blame if YouTube doesn't take us seriously, as they didn't last year. A year later, all these companies are going to retreat. They're not going to care about YouTube. It's the best opportunity to double down on YouTube. Everybody thought I was crazy. I am crazy, but specifically for that reason. We put our head down in 2012, and we went from 10,000 subscribers to 100, then 1 million a short time later. Everybody was still pooing on YouTube, saying, no, the 100 million backfired, it's not worth it, it sucks. We just kept our head down, and now we have this very profitable business that never raised a dollar of venture capital. Why? Because we always went against the grain. We did not follow the institutional imperative. So right now, whenever you see people going this way, look that way. I'm not saying go that way, but you should at least be aware of what's there, and you should say, hey, do I want to be the 15th in line by the time I get to the party? All the booze is gone. So this is me yesterday on the beach. That's not true. That's the only amount of fake news. So historically, when I talk about balance, I use like the tips of justice, the scales of justice. But this time I wanted to use something that connoted a human being as well as health. Why? Balance, I'm a big believer in balance or striving for balance in one's life, meaning work-life balance, eating well, not drinking too much, avoiding bad stuff, even at work, right? So balance, not to shamelessly plug my first book, but in my first book there was like a number of themes. One of them was the concept of the yin-yang, the Chinese, that circle you see. And the idea is if you don't have balance in your life, eventually you die, to kind of distill it in a very simple way. So if you want to succeed and last as a business, it's not just business balance, like cash flow versus growth. It's not just balance between, it's literally, hey, if you are working 18-hour days and you come home and you yell at your significant other, spouse, wife, husband, whatever, that's going to have an impact. You might succeed at your business, but you might lose your spouse. So in the end, in the game of life, you didn't really win anything, right? If your kids don't see you, you probably need to have your priorities, because in the end, nothing's an overnight success, and you don't want to burn yourself out. In the last year, we've seen a lot more talk about mental health, well-being, and all that. So again, it's not something we talk a lot about, but we've seen a large slate of entrepreneurs who in the last 4 or 5 years, especially in markets like LA, San Fran, kill themselves. And that's not weird in that, one, entrepreneurship is more of a thing, right? When you hear about the Mark Zuckerbergs, you realize, hey, you see kids who are coding at 12, and they don't need technically to go to school unless they want to do things like accounting or other fields. So entrepreneurship is a bigger thing. There's a lot more competition. Demand and supply is a bit off. So again, a big balance, big theme. So I'm in Florida. Might not want to plug a Democratic person, but the point is, 1992, James Carville, advisor to Bill Clinton, he coined the concept, the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. So paraphrase this to your startup, it's the cost model, stupid. That is the only thing that matters. The venture capitalists, who here has raised venture capital? Who here wants to raise venture capital? Okay, just one. Okay, it's a minority. Okay, I didn't know, that's why I'm here. It's good to get a mood on who attends these things. So venture capitalists are like, they'll give you an umbrella when it's sunny, but then when it rains, they want it back. But forget venture capitalists. That applies to your bank. If any of you want to start a business, you will need to work with a bank at some point. The bank is the same way. They will say, I'm your best friend, I'm here for you on rainy days. They don't actually mean it. So whatever business you're in, whether you're a sole proprietor, whether you're a partnership, whether you're a startup that raised capital, whether you're relying on a credit line, you need to invest, and frankly, invest in yourself, invest in your product, invest in people. Be careful with marketing. We survive by selling advertising in the end, by selling marketing, and I say this, saying, be careful what you spend on marketing, because there's a famous saying, half of the money you spend on advertising is wasted, you just don't know which half. That's not my saying, but it's very true. So when you are running a business, if you're spending more than you're generating, there's just no magic math there. It's like, we'll lose money, but we'll make it up on volume, is as dumb as it sounds. So whatever you do, you need to have a sustainable. So one thing with WatchMojo that worked really well was, from 2006 to 2012, I was the company's CEO, chief financial officer, chief editor-in-chief, chief counsel, chief marketing, chief this, chief that. And I didn't pay myself much because I believed in what we were doing, and I just was like, you need to keep costs down. All of our competitors were essentially WatchMojo's future chief executive officer in 4 years. All of our competitors were spending $2 to $5 million each year on random individuals who were fundamentally mercenaries. When the going got tough, they put down their weapons. They said, we're leaving the field. I was in the trenches, and I was like, there's all this shelling going around. I'll figure it out. And what that led was to us to just have a fundamentally leaner business model. Two, who here, I guess most of you live in Miami. Who here does not live in Miami? Okay, where are you from?
Columbus.
Okay. Fellow northern climate citizen, I'm from Montreal. So being in Montreal, it's a different universe. When I talk to our peers in San Fran, LA, and especially New York, they don't even understand how our model is possible. So when you hear venture capitalists talk at these big fancy schmancy conferences, they always say, go set up your business where you can find the engineers. You studied engineering? Where did you study engineering? Here, okay. So go, San Francisco. The problem with that is it's really expensive. You have to overpay, and you also end up getting subpar talent. It's like back in the day, people used to be like, man, India, you gotta outsource to India. I was like, that's a boneheaded comment, because everybody who is really good in India has gotten really good jobs with the Microsofts and the Googles. So you're going out there getting subpar talent, speaking 8 time zones, culture communication barriers. It's just not gonna work. So for you guys, if you're gonna be starting a company, I would say if you want to really, really prevail, just find something that gives you a cost advantage. Far more important, because again, think of that analogy of the umbrella. Vision, capital V versus vision, lowercase v. What do you think that means? What am I getting at? Why is one different than the other?
So big vision versus the small vision?
That's close enough, but no. Okay, but go on that. Expand on that. What do you think?
Think big.
Think big is good.
Attract more capital, attract more people, more talent.
Okay, that's not wrong, but I'm looking for something
Narrow
specific.
Narrow it down.
Clarity.
We're getting warmer and colder at once.
What you see versus what you imagine.
Okay, that's probably the close I'm getting to. My point is, so ages ago, who here knows of TechCrunch? Okay, so ages ago I used to write for TechCrunch because I wanted to boost our profile. TechCrunch, now acquired by AOL, part of Oath, at the time founded by Michael Arrington, was a very influential tech blog covering startups. And because they were really, really good at covering the nuts and bolts of this app and this tech, and I was more of a finance, I was Wall Street meets Madison Avenue meets Main Street. They were like, look, write on whatever you want. So when Facebook did their IPO, their editor was like, could you write something about Facebook? Anything. And I go, I'm not going to write about the app and the latest messenger. He goes, no, write something mumbo-jumbo management. So I kind of wrote something, I kind of said the success formula for an entrepreneur is 6 things. It's, first of all, you need to wake up and have ambition. Because it's really hard. And you know what, when you go, you have a scotch at night and you're like, I'm going to take over the world. And I'm going to go out there and build the biggest company since whatever. But then you wake up in the morning and it's a cold, scary, you know what I mean. You just you pull the blanket on top of your head. You're like, screw that. I'm just going to sleep another hour. So 1, you do need to have some ambition. 2, you need vision. And I'm going to come back to this vision in this context. 3, you need execution. I'm sorry, you could be really, really good, but if you can't get shit done, you're not going to go anywhere. 4, persistence. President Coolidge says, the world has so many smart people, has so many this people, so many. The one thing that is totally unshakable is persistence, tenacity, determination. All mean the same thing. Number one thing you need to succeed. Then 4 and 5 are two things that most entrepreneurs underestimate. And if they do underestimate, not to pick on you, you said your first startup was successful, your second one less so. Could it be that you underestimated the importance of luck and timing?
Yeah, and blind spots, right?
Blind spot, okay.
All kinds of blind spots.
Blind spots are, they're there. That's why they're called blind spots. So I didn't say the formula is in failure, but yeah, blind spots obviously are key. But luck and timing, and I personally, if tomorrow I sold WatchMojo, or tomorrow I would never go start another company. There's so much luck and timing that was involved, along with the other 4 things, that I would be like, no, I'm good. I'm going to just keep working on WatchMojo. The 7th one that I added later is actually focus. And I've always been on the fence with focus, because focus, I feel if you're focused on the wrong thing, you kind of waste your life. So focus really comes into play once the first 6 things are down. So now let's backtrack to vision. What I mean by this is, as an entrepreneur, there are certain things, false modesty aside, that you had a vision for, capital V. Whatever mine was. My thing was the world's going towards video. Some of it was, I want to build a different organization. I always used to disagree with my old boss. He meant well, and people always said bad things about it, but he was human. But I was like, hey, we should treat clients this way. No. We should treat employees this way. No. So I said, you know what? I have a certain vision of how to treat insert stakeholder. But then I said at some point, maybe it's just impossible. You know what, Ash? You have a big mouth. You're very idealistic. Go out there, big boy, and see if you can build an organization that treats people this way and that way. And I've been able to do it, and that's partly why I couldn't raise capital. Because the first thing investors want to do was get rid of my 4 or 5 founders and bring their guys who had no freaking clue what they were doing, but it looked really good. So that was the source of friction. Now, my point is, when it comes to online video, I had a certain vision of the world is moving towards video. I had a certain vision that, you didn't want viral content. That's lightning in a bottle. It's not a business. And a lot of other things in terms of, that, like what you said about education. I feel like today what passes off as education is not what you or I or you say. It's what that person learning feels it is. That's why the Khan Academy, huge disruptive thing in education, whereas the first time somebody saw one of their videos, they would have never thought that's education, right? But the point, the very long-winded answer is, in the industry, you have a very limited champ de vision, as they say. You don't see everything. There are more blind spots than what you see. The world, I've hired in the last year a lot of more seasoned executives. 40, 50, I'm going to turn 40 on Monday, but 45 to 55-year-old dudes who have worked at the biggest media companies. And I've realized that they have a lot of value, but they only work if I blend them and balance them well with the guys who built the company with me, who are in their 30s, who may lack that fancy schmancy, I didn't work at Time Warner, I didn't work at NBC, but they've been in the trenches with me, they know what they're doing. And that to me was a challenge. How do I get these guys to value these guys, and then 1 + 1 = 3? But sometimes I'll be like, okay, we have this situation, this challenge, this conundrum. And I wish it was a beautiful choice A, choice B, where there's a clear black and white, a good and evil, a fear and greed, but it's not. The world, especially in business, is a non-stop series of murky, probably mutually exclusive options, and you kind of have to navigate. And frankly, when you don't have a lot of venture capital, you can make one slight mistake or one kind of detour. But it's like you're on a highway. If you take 6 detours, I got news for you. You're not making it on time for the wedding. You're just going to be late, right? So the idea here is that it's okay to say, I don't necessarily have all the elements that are happening, that are going on in the marketplace, but you got to trust your instinct. Jack Welch, when he retired, wrote straight from the gut. I read that around the time I was graduating. I was like, bingo. I was like, I'm overcomplicating it. I'm thinking I need to become an investment banker. I'm thinking I have to be a consultant. That's all great. My brother's a consultant. I wish I could have become an investment banker. But I just listened to my gut, and all of my jobs, I created a job based on my strengths. Who's this guy? Okay, Plato. Plato was a student of Socrates and a teacher of Aristotle. He founded the academy. I assume that's what he looked like. So Plato, another theme in my first book is this concept of the comparative advantage, the principle of specialization. I'm embellishing it here, a jack of all trades and a master of none. I don't have the attention span to do something too long. I could get by in accounting, finance, marketing, sales, but if my life depended on doing any one of those things, I'd be 6 feet under, right? So despite all of that, I knew that the company would only succeed if we specialized. One of our bigger competitors, BuzzFeed, I don't know why quotation mark that. BuzzFeed is one of our bigger competitors. They'll get a video person to research, script, voiceover, and edit a video. With all due respect to BuzzFeed, who has done a lot of things well, they have a little bit of challenges, that is a very bad approach. What we do is there's somebody specifically who is a researcher. Somebody is specifically a writer. Somebody is specifically you're talking about like the best practices. Boom. That's the main thing to know. You want to have people in their lane who are really good at what they do. Because if you come across a great tip to, leverage B-roll in your videos, and that you apply to your travel clips, you could probably apply that to your health clips, et cetera, et cetera. So, key thing, comparative advantage, principle of specializations. Okay, and then I believe we're done. So we're record time, more time for questions if you got any. So, the number one thing is this. The first picture I found was men lie, women lie. But I was like, why go there? This is like, it just says people lie, but numbers don't lie. I, for 6 years, was lying to myself. Not literally, but figuratively. I could point to, I'm very hard on myself. So privately, I was like, God, this isn't working out. I got to do better. But I could point to, and that's the other thing. You meet entrepreneurs at these events, everybody's crushing. Everybody's like, things are amazing, man. They're not. There may be things that are going well, but everybody's got a lot of shit to clean up. My saying was, if you wake up in the morning and you get good news, enjoy it because there's bad news around the corner. And if you wake up to bad news, don't sweat it because you might get worse news. So enjoy this high time in the day. But you could always point to something. This is how far we've been at this. We were the first company, we were the only company to get a guaranteed payment from MySpace, remember them, in 2007 when News Corp bought MySpace and Rupert Murdoch said we're going to kill Google. So when we negotiated our license with them, they were like, okay. And I said, hey, they're like, okay, deal terms are done, happy, let's go out there and make some money. I said, well, speaking of that, we haven't discussed the economics. And they're like, well, we did. It's a 60-40 revenue share in your favor. I'm like, no, we're going to need a minimum guarantee. And they're like, but we're not paying anybody a minimum guarantee. They're like, we're not even paying BBC. I'm like, well, the BBC isn't going to kill this deal over $5,000-10,000, but we would. They're like, what do you want? I'm like, $10,000 a month. It was like silence, crickets. I guess they discussed it, wrote something on the board, and they're like, can we do 5? I said, 5 a month is good. That 5, $60K a month, wasn't retirement money, but it was just a little bit adding to the pot that kept us. But the point is, we could point to these little things. Oh, you guys know Hulu, obviously. We were the first digital media producer on Hulu. Kind of a big deal, but zero revenue, or very little. So we could point to a lot of little successes, but it was only when I said, Ash, you're not lying to yourself, but just be a bit more honest. This is not a successful business. It's an expensive hobby. Very expensive hobby. And you're not even producing what you love. You're producing yoga videos and travel videos. I love travel, nothing against yoga. But I was like, I want to rank stuff. I'm the crazy guy that wants to rank who was worse, Hitler or Stalin. I want to rank what's the best skyscraper, Empire State or Chrysler. So I said, if you're going to not make money, at least do something you're passionate about. So it's once I looked at the numbers. Oh yeah, last one. This is the good one. So basically, I hated that everybody always compares themselves to Steve Jobs. So to be clear, I am in no shape, form, or fashion comparing myself to Steve Jobs. Not at all. But, great line at the commencement speech at Stanford a few years. Okay, this is something I say. I go, success is fluid, subjective, and relative. What do I mean by that? It's fluid in that it changes over time. What you consider a success at 20, very different than what you think is successful at 40. It's subjective. Who cares what others think? It's what you think is success that matters. And lastly, it's relative, because I hate to say it, it's not good to be envious. It's one of the 7 sins after all. But it is relative. It's relative to where you were. The stuff I accomplished when I was 20, very different than the stuff that I consider success now. Also my failures, it's very different. Learnings are different. Yada, yada, yada. But on the subjective part, I don't need to say anything. Basically, you can read it. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. I see you're taking a picture. I'll add this to my Twitter, or wherever, however, their Twitter. Also, if you'd like a copy of any of one of my books pro bono, I'll send you a PDF for your Kindle. That's it, that's all. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. Please. So my largest audience is inside of Facebook. I'm working in the hemp industry. My goal is to educate about hemp because there's a wave coming.
The wave has started, my friend.
Yeah, the wave.
The ocean is angry. It's already started.
Exactly. With the whole CBD movement, there's going to be over 40,000 products made from hemp. So I want to be the authority figure in the hemp industry. What would be one tip or advice that you would give me?
Okay. The right answer is always, by the way, let me think about it. But if I had to say something about hemp, is to say, you can't just start off by saying I want to be the authority figure. One thing that I learned, to give credit to my chief marketing officer, who was the co-founder of the New Fronts, which is a very popular thing in my world, is when we decided to launch a new channel called Mojo Plays for Gaming, I, as an entrepreneur, would have just through sheer willpower and gut and instinct, broken through the wall and done something and succeed. Which is the way an entrepreneur works. Him as an executive, he actually went and he kind of drew a scatter, a diagram and said, okay, there's the guys who are like the hardcore, let's say, users of weed that are chronicling it, and then there's like the guys who are maybe not even smokers and are just looking at it, or others who are more like the medical outside of it. And then there's like the B2C, hey, I'm here to sell you weed, or this is where you can buy weed, versus the, hey, I'm covering the industry of weed, right? I would say the right approach is you should do that exercise, because when I was like thinking, oh my God, WatchMojo, I gotta launch it, it's because I knew other people were too. And when we launched, no surprise, there was 15 other people trying to do the same thing. And I wish I would have actually, despite being the crazy entrepreneur that could get shit done just through sheer willpower, I wish I would have done that exercise. So what you should do, whatever you're doing, put it on ice for a week. A week will make a difference in the grand scheme of things. This is year 13 of my life here. I'm 39, so a third of my life, including when I was in diapers, has been spent on WatchMojo, right? But if I would have taken an extra week or two to do that exercise, I would have hair like Fabio still, because there's a lot of stress and mistakes early on that cost me from not studying the market. So what you should do is that. Do a competitive landscape, put all the people, make sure you know what they're doing, and find the open field. Wayne Gretzky, if I go back to him, they used to say, how can you score so much? And he would, sorry? No, yeah, he goes, you can't, yeah. No, he goes, he didn't say, well, he might have said that too, but he goes, you score 0 of the shots you don't take. But he said, it's just you gotta get empty. He was like, the rink is pretty big. He's like, if there's 3 defenders here, just go there. So you find the open spot in that field.
Thank you.
Cool, yeah.
For people who are trying to start their first company or first team, what do you suggest to balance going through the, people who you fully trust or people who are good at your
Well, I mean, hopefully those 2 things are not mutually exclusive. Look, there's been a big trend in our world where some VCs, and you guys know Y Combinator? Y Combinator is like a very popular, accelerator program, and they say if you show up alone, I think Paul Graham, he goes, no, just go back home or go get me a co-founder because it's rough, you're in the trenches. That's true, but entrepreneurs also like co-founders because they can play one off the other. I used to ask, my wife and I started WatchMojo, I used to ask some VCs, how do you feel about that dynamic? And they would be very coy, but eventually I would shake them down, feed them 8 drinks, and they would say, look, we don't love it because historically when the going gets rough, we do need to be able that we can throw one out, keep the other. So if you and your wife are on the same page, it's harder. It was that's their MO. So to your answer, here's what I would do. Just go out there and meet a lot of people. And don't go up to an event like this where it's this could be the greatest partner for you, but just through serendipity, you go to this guy. By the way, that is probably the right founder for any one of us, the next generation, but that's neither here nor there. I think you need to just be out there a lot. Explain, use a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What is the opportunity? What is the threat? And mirror that with someone else. And then sit down. Don't jump to conclusions. You wouldn't get married just by seeing somebody being like, oh, you're hot, I like you. Oh, your name, my name. Christine, I'm Christian. It was meant to be. Like, you should take a little bit of time because there's no overnight success. You're going to work with these people for, I have the same team as I did. And that's the main thing I like. It's the same team. We were together. I had to learn a lot, but that's a great feeling. So get out there, understand what you bring and what you need. 3, don't think of, is this a person for you today? Is this somebody you can work with for 10 years? And this notion of like, are they good or are they people you trust? I think it's more, are they willing to subsist? Is this somebody that you could be in the trenches with? Because if you start with a founder, let's say, and as much as I never did any decision for money, and that's when people go like, why are you like in the position that you are? It's because I say I never cared about it. And I mean that sincerely, right? So if you end up giving half of a business to your partner, and even if there's a vesting period, but in 6 months he's like, this isn't for me, I'm going to go back to teaching. Or you know what, I'm going to go back to my cushy job at Google. Even if he has invested, you have a little bit of a situation to clean up. So you're looking more for like some hard, tangible skills, but also a lot of intangible signals that this guy or this girl is going to be there for a while. And oh, by the way, to be fair, that's another point. Go for someone that's complementary. We never had any of those Me Too stuff at our company, at least not that I'm aware of. First of all, I generally root for the underdog, so I would never tolerate if a woman or a person of color was being abused or taken advantage of. But it's because my wife would have never tolerated that. And even when my wife was on maternity leave, if I ever felt the company was becoming a locker room, I'd be like, let's cut that SHIT out. We're in the presence of kids. And I would say, okay, we need to bring more females here. And you can't really say that, but it's because, if you have 8 guys working together 50 hours a week, guess what? It turns into a locker room, right? So it's kind of not a one-word answer. I never give one-word answers, by the way. Let's go to Sarah. You first, Juan, then Sam, then Marcos.
So I'm curious, maybe we missed it in the beginning, but when you started, were you working somewhere else?
Okay, no. So how was I able to?
Yeah, and then if you could add into, you were talking about you were into video and so on. Was that something that really interested you, or
sure.
How did you come up?
Yeah, all good. I did start off, but it's fine to repeat. So I was very fortunate that because I was a VP of ad sales and worked somewhere for 5 years and I was a minority shareholder, I made a couple $100,000. In Montreal, that's worth 10 million in New York. I didn't have 10 million. I had a couple $100,000, but in Montreal, it's the equivalent. It's probably the equivalent of 300,000 in Miami. Like, I'm assuming Miami and Montreal are both pretty, like, unless you want a penthouse overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, I'm guessing Miami's not an expensive place to live? Right? Or no? Am I crazy? It's expensive? Okay, then scrap that. Then the 200 is probably 800. It depends, I guess, where you live. That was the stupidest thing I said probably today. I forgot the views, the proximity to the water. I retract that comment. 200 is probably closer to 1 million. Just to give you an idea. So with 1 million in 2006 in Miami, you could start a business and survive for a couple of years. So in Montreal, with a couple $100,000, and knowing accounting and knowing finance, I kind of set it up properly where I loaned myself the company so that I could then take that out over time. And I never overlook that because it's really disingenuous to walk in here and say, I never raised capital, and somehow I own a majority share of a company that's profitable and doing well. That's like the bullshit, That's like when it's not true, And that's when I go sometimes to conferences and I hear this version of facts, but then when I go research it, I'm like, the guy inherited this much? Or he ended up somehow a brick fell on his foot and he sued the government, the city, and he got the settlement, and that's different, So I did have that, and that's an important thing too, in that twice I took pay cuts to put myself in a position to eventually start WatchMojo. When I wanted initially to do investment banking and I started working at the companies I did, I thought I was worth this and I should do these things, and it was a bit humbling to say, okay, those opportunities don't exist, so if I want to get myself somewhere, what do I have to sacrifice? So that's the first one. The video, it was basically, I was more into storytelling. I had written a lot of articles, and having left that company, I was barred from doing another men's online magazine, so I had to think of video. Well, I had to think of something else, and I said, well, the world is going towards video, and I thought it was a good challenge. I knew that TV companies would not put their videos online, so I said, hey, I'm going to fill that void. I'm going to start producing content. The content pyramid is ultra premium. Think Avatar, think Star Wars, then super premium, think American Idol, Mad Men. Then premium is where we operate in. And then you have prosumer, which is like a kid in a basement with amazing, like this guy's going to be producing better content than us in 2 years using this. That's just reality. And then he's already doing that. I'm sure. He's live streaming all this and selling sponsorship as we talk. And then you have user-generated content. So in 2005, if I would have said, what kind of content do you want, internet? They would have said, user-generated in HD. It's like, not that I'm Ford at all, but like when Ford was like, people, what do you want? They would have said faster horses. And that's the vision part. So that answers the question. You had a question, and then I think he left. Oh, you're there, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so for a new startup that just launched.
What space?
So in my space, it's like an Airbnb for work and recreational space.
Okay, yes, you mentioned that.
So we just.
So like a Sea-Doo or like a yacht?
No, so like if you want to rent a soccer field.
Okay, got it. Oh, okay.
You can rent it. And so,
Cool.
And this applies not just to the private sector, the public sector as well.
What's the name again?
My Turf.
My Turf.
Okay.
Now I heard might, but now My Turf makes
My
a
Turf,
lot of
Your
sense.
Turf, like
My
that.
Turf now makes a lot of sense for that product.
What would you recommend in terms of like social media strategy? Like how do you determine what content to provide across the different channels? Right?
Okay.
So like Facebook is one, and you talked about how that's changing.
Easy for me, easy. A few years ago, like I said, I love soccer, football, play a couple times a week. In Montreal, very different. Like Montreal, you can find guys playing hockey any day, even in August when it's like 35 degrees Celsius, which is like 90 degrees Fahrenheit. What you should do is you should be the guy that gets games organized and going. Because I could tell you that if you are, I'm 39, if you're like a 39 father and you want to get back in shape and you want to start doing it, good luck finding 18 dudes who are going to play 9-on-9 baseball or 6-on-6, basketball or anything. Early on, we got 3-on-3 foot soccer. I was like, I'm blessed. Do that. That you'd be surprised. Pick a few, and this put a little bit of time on it. Go find neighborhoods where you have don't go where all the frat boys are and put up like a game Saturday at 8 a.m. Nobody's going to show up.
That's not really what I'm talking about. So
Sorry.
That I get.
Okay.
And I'm starting, I do that already. But Facebook is one medium, Instagram is one medium, and they're all very different. Like, how do you determine what to communicate to the different platforms? Right?
Got it.
I don't want to do the exact same thing.
No, you
on
shouldn't.
Instagram or on Facebook.
Okay.
And then the second part of the question is, you talked about how Facebook is changing. Obviously, it was getting a little outdated in terms of who's on there and what you can do with it. So how do you feel that that's changing? How do you think about it?
Okay, let's go back to the first one. The first one thing about Facebook is you got to find something where you can tag somebody. So again, it's a very relationship-driven platform. So again, if using that example, I'm like, oh my God, My Turf is sponsoring a game of soccer with a barbecue after, and I would tag my brother and say, yo bro, do you want to go? We're only 2, but maybe there'll probably be enough people there. You know what I mean? So I think through Facebook, you want to have a relationship-driven strategy. Through Instagram, I think what you would do, and these are very pedestrian ideas, you should make them sexier, is cool shots, for example. So you have a shot of a guy teeing up a football at a cool angle, or a 6-second thing where the guy kicks it. Now, you want to add layers to localize it, because if you're in Miami and I'm in Montreal and we want to play baseball, it doesn't really work, right? But it's through the native aspect of it. YouTube is ultimately videos and content. So you, depending on how hardcore you want to go into content marketing, you could start to have, hey, here we are with Joe, a baseball coach, and start to teach people how to do a fastball, how to do a curveball. And then hey, Saturday, Joe's going to be there to teach you guys how to do it. And then people come out and it becomes part of what they do. Is that a bit better?
Yeah.
Good.
We actually launched here and in Toronto.
Okay, cool. Okay. Okay.
There's a couple of us.
I know, yes. Somebody had a question.
In the cafe space.
Marcos and then Darius.
I wanted to ask you, what's next for WatchMojo?
So WatchMojo, when we turned 10, again, what did I start off saying? You talked about your book writing. I talked about Lazar Brothers, an investment bank in New York started by Jewish French dudes who survived centuries of prejudice, 2 world wars, a Holocaust, and they're still around. So I think our challenges are all fairly tame, and you know what I mean? We're in the 1%. We're lucky. That said, at 10 years, I said, you know what? If I in 10 years look back and was still the guy doing top 10 lists, I'd be very fortunate. It's a great existence. I may be bored out of my mind. And if you don't innovate, then you suffer from innovator's dilemma. You got to keep your feet moving. So for us, if you look at what our audience likes, what we produce has a hint of factual DNA. So for us, we got to keep pushing the envelope. We can't just be the guys that mash up media and do top 10 lists. So that means other formats, other platforms. Could be game shows. Could be things that are semi-scripted. On a very long arc, it's also getting into scripted programming. One, I like that personally. Two, our fans are ultimately fans of movies, TV shows, and all that. So it's not that crazy. Cable did to TV networks what the internet did to cable. But cable originally started off as aggregating, and then all of a sudden they started to produce. History repeats itself, we're just following that cycle. And then finally, globalization. So we launched WatchMojo Espanol, which people thought I was crazy a few years ago. They're like, there's no money, what are you thinking? Today, everybody's like living La Vida Loca, patting themselves on their back that it was their idea, and it's great. It's at 3 million subscribers, and it'll be at 6 or 7 million subscribers. And we launched Francais, that's at 1 million. German, we have partnerships in India and China, and we're looking for partners for in Arabic. Because YouTube is such a global platform, but if you only have English language programming, you're only serving half of that audience.
And I read your model wasn't ad-based, it was syndicated content.
No, it used to be, no. So from 2006 to 2012, because the ad market wasn't mature enough, we would license our content. So like companies would pay us a few $1,000, we added it, it kept the lights on. It was never going to be a big business, it was a business that was like a bridge to getting where we wanted to be. The model is ad supported, it's either YouTube sells the ads or gives us a cut, or we sell the ads and give another cut. And YouTube doesn't sell an ad before every video anyway, they'll sell an ad if you're lucky around half of the videos. And that's fine. Question?
First, I want just to make sure its valuation of the company is 103 billion, right?
103 billion, yes, of course, yeah. We're doing this presentation on our island. No.
Because this is what I checked.
103 billion.
Anyway,
No, I wish.
This is not
If it was 103 billion, we would all be doing this on our island called WatchMojo
no,
somewhere in the
why
Caribbean.
not? I just thought you modest.
No.
Here, you know.
Our valuation has grown a lot, but it's not quite 100 billion.
Anyway, this is not a question. My question is, what do you do if your vision is so big, nobody even believes? Everybody, like, you present your vision, they're like, what the fuck? Come on.
Then you're actually doing your job. To be honest with you, that's what you want to do. I think, here's the thing.
I'll tell you my,
because you have an idea for something that people think you're crazy.
My vision is to organize all world's real estate information and to do all transactions in one place. Everybody, buyers, sellers, everybody. So like build the unique one real estate system for everybody. And when you say this, because the real estate market is so in local considered, so everybody, like I spoke today with guys who really has money, and they are from my country. So I spoke to the guys, okay, but another came like, what the fuck are you talking about? To organize the whole real estate. So basically, I'm good at what I'm doing. We succeeded locally very good in little segments, but we never raised capital. We never asked nobody. So we're doing this for many years, and right now we want to scale. We need money. So probably we need.
Is the information you're looking for locked in? What I mean is, like, if let's say there's information on Trulia or Redfin, which are some sites that have real estate information, right?
Yeah.
Is that information publicly available, or is that proprietary to them? That's the billion-dollar question. My point is, there's a way you could do it even if it's closed, but it's kind of taking a backdoor, which is scraping the data. If you scrape the data, those guys can cut you off at any moment.
Oh, no.
Okay.
We have unique.
You need the okay. So
we develop the model. Basically, it's gonna be like 10x than Zillow or Trulia.
Okay,
so
but
the guy said
your challenge then is a marketing. If that's the case,
exactly,
your challenge is marketing.
No, but to scale, we preparing ICO. You hear blockchain ICO. Everybody knows that, right? Even my sons. What is blockchain?
Blockchain is distributed ledger.
Okay,
If he wants a job, I'll sign him to a 20-year contract right now.
Okay. Akiras, you want a job? You want to sign up? He offer you a contract.
How much?
So he offer you a contract. You want to make money? How much you want?
No, but he's like, Dad, I will own his company in 10 years. You're selling me short. No. Oh no, your challenge, if I understand it, is more marketing.
No. At this time, we need like from 200 to 500,000 to do really successful ICO. Not potato salad, not Ponzi coin, but really successful ICO. You need money, And so I'm approaching investors, and they're like, I'm like, shit, I know. But I'm getting better.
It's a numbers game. You have to hit 100 for 10 to consider, for 1 to actually sign a check. It's a numbers game. You need to talk to 100 for 10 to meet you, and if you're lucky, then even 1 of that, not even 1 out of 10. It's a numbers game.
That's what I did. I put a list of 10 pitches. Today I did 2.
You'll need more than that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, let's go. Okay, him first, let's ask one, then you. Yeah.
I actually speaking about your marketing skills. How have you reacted to YouTube's new policy about monetization videos?
Sure. So that's very much in the weeds. Hopefully, I'll try to make it. I'll try to make it specific for your needs and useful to the others. So look, ultimately, I'll make it first general for the others to be useful. When you build a business on someone else's platform, you benefit from that risk. So you can't be a hypocrite when things change. You're like, this sucks, man, life's unfair. It's like if you fly close to the sun, you might get burnt, and that's part of it. You have a question?
Oh.
I'll get to that in a second. So, but specifically, look, we never like it when people like lay off and there's bad news. So we don't love to see other creators hurt. That is fundamentally a sincere comment. But I think YouTube saying anybody could upload content and start making money was batshit crazy, because that will just encourage fake news and crazy stuff that shouldn't, because you shouldn't technically be able to make money just by uploading, because then you could do like, hey, there's a catastrophe here, look, people start looking, you're making money, and you're encouraged to do it. So some of their decisions was actually smart to stop people from being able to make money right off the bat. That's one. Two, long term, look, you don't want people, when YouTube make changes, they scream foul, they're like, censorship, man. I'm like, no, that's not censorship. Censorship is the government can come to you and say, you can say something. But a company like YouTube, which is publicly traded, but it's their company, they can say, hey, look, we don't want to hurt our users or our advertisers, so we're going to make these changes. I think long-term, YouTube has always played it right. They're not perfect, but I'll bet on YouTube figuring things out any day of the week, because YouTube's entire mantra from day one was, come to our search engine, we'll give you good results, and we're willing to send traffic out, and over time we'll get you guys to come back. And even as a business, they share revenue. So I understand that to some people, some of their decisions seem unfair, and while I am biased, I also give a lot of grief to YouTube privately. I think YouTube fundamentally gets it right. But some of their decisions are unpopular with a lot of people who are smaller and growing.
Yeah, it was a little. I've seen for the past year that many YouTubers, especially the smaller ones, are having a hard time adapting to rapid changes.
Okay, but here's the thing. If somebody else said this, I think it's quite poignant. I'm not taking credit, it sounds harsh. If you were making $8 before and now you're making $0, that is not a reason for you to quit. If you really are passionate and you want to be a creator, for 7 years, we lost money, racked up heavy bills, we believed in what we did. I find it's actually disingenuous now for a lot of these creators who supposedly are in it just because they love content to complain that I used to make $3 a video and now I'm making $0. It shouldn't really matter, right? Like, this is a long-term thing. You should be committed to it. And, I think YouTube as a business is right, although it's a bit unpopular.
I have
Cool.
a question about
Sure, you and then Reza.
what keeps YouTube on the top. It's not so. The idea is pretty simple, right? To start other companies.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody is ever on top, because it's relative. We have bigger competition that we're trying to chase, and we also have smaller guys trying to kill us. So you're never on top. If you think you're on top, I got news for you. You're like the sheep that's like, wow, what a beautiful mountain. Then you got all these wolves around you. So I don't think we're on top of anything. Two, that's what I'm a paranoid person, right? I mean, I'm always worried. I work quite a lot. Even when I'm not working, I'm thinking. You just have to be aware. But you also have to be smart, take calculated risk. And like I said, you can't, it's like the football analogy. If it's first down, you could aim, you could go for a Hail Mary. But I mean, if it's fourth down and you need an inch, don't throw it smack down into like the opponent's numbers there. Like, just take the easy play to keep the game going. So long as you don't die and you give up the ball to the opposition, you're still going forward. So that is something that the VCs that I spoke to early on didn't like. They wanted me to just take the ball and throw like 4 Hail Marys into the end zone, because then they would move on to their next project. Whereas I was like, no, I want to keep playing. I want to keep the ball. So never think you're on top. Never think you're infallible, impenetrable, indestructible. You are all those things. Everybody's very fragile, people, companies. You forget crazy stories like Enron and Valiant and all these things and WorldCom. companies that were very successful and we thought otherwise healthy just perished. So you got to be paranoid. Andy Grove, Intel, only the paranoid survive. Question?
Name a book other than yours.
I never plug my own books usually, unless I'm like, you can have them for free. Yeah, name a book that I like.
That you want to read.
I would say it's case by case. Like, to me, books that influenced me straight from the gut, Jack Welch was at that point in my life very useful. It depends. I wish, for me, I'll give you an analogy. I wish I could go back and read any of the media ones, like William Randolph Hearst's bio or Cy Newhouse, because I'm building a media company that is the latest generation of a Time or a Condé Nast. So I'm like, idiot face, you should have read this 20 years ago before starting your career because you lost so much time and mistakes. So what are you trying to build? What is the broad space or type? What is the profile? Like, if you're trying to build an Elon Musk type of business, go read his bio. It's very simple. But that's good for you. It's probably not good for you.
So basically, my question is about the vision. So what kind of book that gives you the vision?
Okay.
Any kind of.
Sorry, Ash. I'm
It's
sorry,
time
the
to go.
discussion's so
You're,
great.
oh my God, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry, but you guys can continue the
Here's what I'll do.
conversation in
I
the
will,
family space.
I will think of 5 books, 10 books in the next few days, and I'll just add them to my LinkedIn. But I'll list my profile. I'll be like, if you're into finance, go read something by some big shot investment banker. Don't read, Larry Page, How I Built a Search Engine People Love. It's not going to be as relevant